Hello everyone, I am Dr. Smita Jha, Assistant Professor, Tata College. I hope you would have benefited from my last video tutorial. I also believe that all of you are studying very well, as now there are lots of video tutorial available on the university website. Other poems of the syllabus from this paper have already been covered. So today I am taking up a play Tughlaq written by veteran artist and dramatist Girish Karnad. This is meant for the students of semester 5. First of all, I'll talk on authorial's background, then I'll present a detailed outline of the story of the play. Later on, we will talk on topics like Tughlaq as a tragedy of intrigue, a historical play, a contemporary play, or a political allegory, and its plot and structure. Students, I request you to please go through the text of the Tughlaq. This is the text Tughlaq written by Girish Karnad. This one which I am having is from Oxford University Press. Let's start with the introduction of the play. Tughlaq is a 1964 Indian Kannada language play written by Karnad. The 13-scene play is set during the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, the 14th century Sultan of Delhi, an authoritarian but idealistic king who disintegrated into failure in a span of 20 years. The king wanted to build a secular state. He moved his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad, a Hindu populated city. His ideas about the economy were new, but he became a total failure who couldn't control his kingdom. Student Girish Karnad was a versatile genius. He was very good actor and has acted not only on the stage of the theatre but also in a number of first-rate movies. He also makes frequent appearance on the small screen. He has also about 6 plays to his credit, which include Yayati, Hayabadan and Tughlaq, the last one being a masterpiece. This man of versatile genius was born at Mathiran near Bombay in 1938. He had been a Ross Scholar at Oxford from 1960 to 1963 and a Wawa Fellow from 1970 to 1972. He was also a visiting professor and resident scholar at the Chicago University for some time. He died on 2019. Actually, Karnad's first play is Yayati and it came out in 1961. Karnad's second play is Tughlaq that came out in 1962. It was originally written in Kannada but was later translated into English by Karnad himself. It was an immediate success and at once catapulted him to fame, to his first rank of Indo-Anglican dramatist. Girish Karnad was told by someone that there are no good history plays in India and so he decided to write one. Actually, Tughlaq was first staged in Urdu in 1966 as a student production of NSD, National School of Drama. In English, it was enacted first in 1970 in Mumbai. Students, first of all, we will go through the outline story of the play. This outline story I am reading from this book. Muhammad Tughlaq was the ruler of Delhi in the 14th century. He was a visionary and an idealist as well as a crafty political figure who could hold his own against heavy odds. Because of this disability in his nature, he fell to pieces within 20 years. For this reason, he is also known in history as Mad Tughlaq. This story of Tughlaq is very interesting, and somehow some scholars believe that it is a political allegory where Tughlaq has been compared with Nehru. People suspect the Sultan because it is rumored that he came to the throne after murdering his own father and brother, and that too at prayer time. It was given out that an elephant had gone mad just at prayer time. There was great confusion as a large number of people were killed and wounded. His father and brother were also killed as they were at their prayers unarmed. The Sultan's own mother believed this gossip and didn't talk to him since that day. She hated him. His stepmother loved him dearly, was always anxious about his welfare, but it was soon clear that she too suspected him. Beside the stepmother, Barani, the historian, and Nazif, a Hindu turned Muslim, and his Wazir were his closest friend and well-wishers. Here you also getting an idea about the characters of the play. I am just reading the list of the characters of this drama in order of appearance. First of all, announcer appears, then Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq, then Azam, then Aziz, then stepmother, then the Wazir Muhammad Nazif, then Jia-ud-Din Varani. These are his friends, and Sheikh Imamuddin, Shahabuddin, Sardar Ratan Singh, Sheikh Samusuddin Tajuddin, and Ghayazuddin Abbasad. And the side actors are crowd of citizens, Kaji Malik and return guard, doorkeeper, servant, Sayyid Muzain, soldiers, Hindu women, refugee family watchman, and watchman Karim. The action of the play takes place first of all in Delhi in the year 1327, then on the road from Delhi to Daulatabad, and lastly in and around the fort of Daulatabad 5 years later. So this play covers around the 20 years, and this also highlights his shifting of his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad. Now, the play opens in a big yard in front of the Chief Court of Justice in Delhi. The Chief Justice is known as Qazi Mumalik, and he is the highest judicial authority in the kingdom. A large number of people, both Muslim and Hindus, are gathered in the yard. From their conversation, we learn a lot about the Sultan. We heard that the Sultan is disliked generally by the people. The people do not like his pose of impartiality between Hindus and Muslims. They do not like that the Hindus should be exempted from the payment of jizya tax, which the Hindus always paid. They have also heard the gossips of his having murdered his own father and brother. The Sultan has declared that the people are free to criticize him openly. So in Kanpur, a great Muslim saint, Imamuddin, has been spitting poison against him, and half of the city is already burning. No doubt the Sultan has made prayer 5 times each day compulsory as ordained in the Quran, but he is supposed to be partial to the Hindus. They think that his move to shift his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad is entirely owing to the fact that it is a Hindu city. Its population being mainly Hindu, the Hindus consider him to be a hypocrite waiting for a suitable opportunity to stab them in the back. He is trying to befriend them merely to gain his own ends. Otherwise, he is a devout and fanatic Muslim. He would reveal his true nature at the right time. The trial is sequel. Actually, the great interest in being generated by a cause which is being heard by the Kaji Mumalik at the time, some land of a Brahmin was confiscated by government officials, and now the Brahmin has brought a lawsuit against the state. The impartiality of the Sultan is thus on trial. Soon a court official comes out and announces that the Brahmin has won the case. The confiscated land would be returned to him and 500 dinars would be paid to him as compensation. In addition, he would also get a government job in the civil service of the country. The Sultan is quite impartial and justice is done to all without consideration at all of the person's religion. Here comes a turn where Sultan, and we will see his announcement. Now the Sultan himself comes on the scene and makes the following announcement. My beloved people, you have heard the judgment of the Kaji and seen for yourself as to how to justice works in my kingdom. Without any consideration of might or weakness, religion or creed, may this moment burn bright and light up our path towards greater justice, equality, progress, and peace. Not just peace, but a more purposeful life. And to achieve this end, I am taking a new step in which I hope I shall have your support and cooperation. Later this year, the capital of my empire will be moved from Delhi to Daulatabad. The crowd reacts in bewilderment. Muhammad smiles. So, this is the major turning point in Tughlaq's life as well as in the history of India. Your surprise is natural, but I beg you to realize that this is so no mad whim of a tyrant. My ministers and I took this decision after careful thought and discussion. My empire is large now and embraces the south, and I need a capital which is at its heart. Delhi is too near the border, and you will know its peace is never free from the fear of invaders. But for me, the most important factor is that Daulatabad is a city of the Hindus, and the capital develops and strengthens in my kingdom. I invite you all to accompany me to Daulatabad. This is only an invitation and not an order. Only those who have faith in me may come with me. With their help, I shall build an empire which will be the envy of the world. In this moment, the guard disperses the crowd, and Azam hangs behind. Actually, he wants to see the Brahmin who has won the suit against the Sultan. The Brahmin soon comes out, and Azam recognizes him to be his closest friend, Azam and Aziz, whom he had not met for a long time. They embrace and cry with joy. Aziz explains that he went to a Brahmin's place, purchased the confiscated land through a backdated contract, disguised himself as a Brahmin, and then came to the court and won the case against the Sultan. Now he is a government officer, and he invites Azam to come with him and work as his subordinate. The two are comic characters, but they will also play a crucial role in the play. These two, Azam and Azim. And now we will see the connection of Muhammad with his stepmother. Next, we are taken to the palace and introduced to Muhammad and the stepmother. Muhammad proudly tells her that he has solved one of the most famous problems in chess, which even noted the chess player could not solve. But the stepmother, who really loves him, is very much worried about the fact that the Sultan doesn't sleep at night. As usual, when questioned as to the reason, the Sultan replied, I pray to the Almighty to save me from sleep. All day long I have to worry about tomorrow, but it's only when the night falls that I can step beyond all that. I look at the placards and I think of Ibn al-Mujj, who thought it was an ostrich egg, and Durruma, who thought it was a swallow. And then I want to go back to their poetry and sink myself in their verse. Then again I want to climb up to the top of the tallest tree of the world and call out to my people, come up my people, I'm waiting for you, confide in me with your worries. Let me share your joys. Let's laugh and cry together, and then let's pray. Let's pray till our bodies melt and flow and our blood turns into air. History is ours to play with ours now. Let's be the light and cover the earth with greenery. Let's be darkness and cover up the boundaries of nation. Come, I am waiting to embrace you all. Here we see this strange statement of the Sultan, where he denies to go to sleep and where he talks about his dreams to his stepmother, and we find it quite strange. The Sultan, actually the mother is very much surprised by his answers. He considers it to be a clever piece of rhetoric. Muhammad's troubles are mounting while Sheikh Imamuddin is turning the people in Kanpur against him. His boyhood friend Ain-ul-Mulk has revolted and is marching on Delhi with an army of 30,000 soldiers. 30,000, and he hardly has 6,000 soldiers to face him. However, his Bazir Nazir stresses that Sheikh closely resembles him. This gives ideas to Muhammad, and against the advice of Varni, he decided to play this game in his own way. He announces that they would go to the Kannauj the day after tomorrow in the evening, and the army should be told to be ready for the march. Najib and Sheikh Sahibuddin, an outsider whom he has invited, would look after the affairs in his absence. He then goes away with Nazif to see the commander-in-chief, and Barani and the stepmother are left alone together. It is clear from their conversation that the stepmother does not like Nazif and is rather hostile to him. With sudden violence, he says, if he goes on like this, I won't wish his fate even for a dog. Muhammad is a crafty politician, and he can hold his own against heavy odds. He makes a public announcement that the greater Saint Sheikh Imamuddin would address the people of Delhi, and the Sultan himself would also be present in his meeting. But none turns up for the meeting. The Sheikh is thus disgraced, and it is clear that henceforth he would be taken as a spy of the Sultan. Later it transpires that the soldiers of the Sultan had gone from door to door and prevented the people from going to the meeting of the Sheikh. Not only that, the Sultan persuades the Sheikh to go to his envoy of peace to Ain-ul-Mulk so that there is no fighting and precious Muslim blood is not shed. Moreover, Ain-ul-Malik is his boyhood friend, and he doesn't want to fight him. He says, I am willing to make peace, but how can I do it? I don't even know why he's turned against me. He won't even see my official invoice, but he will see you. He respects you as every Muslim in India does. He will trust your word. That's why I am asking you. Will you please go as my envoy and discuss him from his folly? Please, Sheikh Sahib, I am not asking you only for my sake, but for all the Muslims who will die at the hands of Muslim. At the hands of fellow Muslim is not that enough. For the great Sheikh Imamuddin, you have attacked me for inaction. You can't turn away now. When you are offered a chance, you can't. The upshot is that the Sikh falls in his trap and agrees to act as the royal envoy. They will leave for Kannauj that very evening and meet Ain-ul-Mulk the very next day. The Sheikh remarks, you are the cleverest man in the world. The battle takes place at Kannauj. As soon as Ain-ul-Mulk comes to the battlefield, the Sheikh, dressed in a royal dress, standing on a gorgeous elephant and looking almost like the Sultan, gets ready to go to Ain-ul-Mulk as the royal envoy to make peace. But before he can do so, the trumpet is sounded, which is a signal for attack. At once, soldiers pour out of the surrounding hills and attack Ain-ul-Mulk and his army. They in turn take the Sheikh to be the Sultan and shoot so many arrows at him that soon he is dead and looks like a gory porcupine. Ain-ul Mulk didn't give the call of battle, it was given by the Sultan. There was lot of confusion and much bloodshed here. This victorious Sultan is soon back in his palace amid this general rejoicing. He explains to his stepmother and others the cause of the Sikhs' death and his great grief. As regard Ain-ul Mulk, he has pardoned him and sent him back as governor of Awadh because he could easily detect a flaw. In his solution of the chase problem, this pleased Muhammad highly, and so he pardoned the defeated enemy and restored him to his previous positions. And now here comes again a turning point. Here we got introduced from the Amirs and the intrigue. However, a revolt is brewing against the Sultan. The Sikhs, the Amirs and the Sayyids are by now able to see through his crafty nature. Ratan Singh, who has his own axe to grind, also invite Sahibuddin to the meeting of the rebels. It is agreed that at prayer time, when the entire palace would be unarmed, they would rise as one man and kill the Sultan. The call of the muezzin for prayers would be the signal for attack. The meeting proceeds till the prayer time, and when the time of the prayer arrives, the Sultan decides that they would not go to any mosque but pray in the very room. As soon as the rebels rise to attack the Sultan, 20 Hindu soldiers hidden behind the curtain attack the rebels, and there is general massacre. Only a few were able to escape. The fact is that Ratan Singh had seen all Sahibuddin's damaging letter to the Sultan. His father had killed Ratan Singh's father and usurped his kingdom. Ratan Singh posed as Sahib's adopted brother and now had his revenge. The Sultan was mad with anger at the treachery of Sahibuddin and fiercely attacked him and killed him with his own hands. Ratan Singh has disappeared and nobody could tell of his whereabouts. Here we see how Ratan Singh disappears, and the other things I will discuss in the next video tutorials. Here I end today's lecture. Soon I will upload the second part of this play, Tughlaq. And